You were the kid who didn't need to be reminded twice. You noticed what needed to be done before anyone asked. You learned early how to stay quiet when adults were stressed, how to make yourself useful, how to not add to the mess. People called you mature for your age. They meant it as a compliment. You learned how to handle things on your own, emotionally, practically, quietly. While other kids were allowed to be careless, you were paying attention, watching moods, reading the room, adjusting yourself so things wouldn't fall apart. Now, as an adult, you're reliable. You show up. You keep it together. You don't panic easily. Others trust you, depend on you, lean on you. And yet, when things finally slow down, something feels off. Rest doesn't come naturally. Asking for help feels uncomfortable, even unnecessary, maybe even unsafe. You're calm on the outside, but your body rarely fully lets go. You might tell yourself that this is just who you are, that being composed, self-sufficient, and emotionally contained is simply your personality. But what if that calm competence wasn't something you chose? What if it was something you had to learn? When people see you now, they often see stability. They see someone grounded, capable, emotionally steady. Someone who doesn't need much, doesn't complain, doesn't unravel under pressure. From the outside, it looks like strength. And in many ways it is. But what often gets missed is how that strength was formed. Because society tends to misunderstand people like you in a very specific way. It assumes that if you learned to cope early, you must have been naturally equipped for it. That if you carried responsibility well, it must not have been heavy. So your independence is praised. Your self-control is admired. Your lack of visible need becomes proof that you're fine. No one asks what it cost you to become that way. What they don't see is that growing up too fast doesn't mean you skip childhood. It means you compressed it. You learned to manage emotions before you learned how to feel safe inside them. You learned to be useful before you learned how to be held. You learned to anticipate problems before anyone taught you how to rest. From the outside, it can look like confidence. On the inside, it can feel like constant readiness. As if some part of you is always on standby, quietly monitoring, quietly prepared to step in. This is where the misunderstanding becomes subtle but important. Because the trait people admire, your composure, your reliability, your emotional containment, is often not a simple preference. It's an adaptation. Not something you chose because it fit you best, but something you developed because the environment required it. And when an adaptation works well, it becomes invisible to others, and eventually, even to you. So instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" a more honest question begins to surface. What did I have to learn early that I never got the chance to unlearn? When you grow up having to be responsible too early, your brain doesn't interpret that as a personality trait forming. It interprets it as a situation that needs managing. The brain's first priority is not happiness, it's safety. And safety, in an unpredictable or emotionally demanding environment, often means becoming alert, capable, and self-contained. So your nervous system adapts. It learns that staying composed keeps things stable, that noticing subtle shifts in mood helps prevent problems, that being dependable reduces risk. Over time, your brain starts treating responsibility not as something you do, but as something you are. You don't wait for things to fall apart before responding. Your system stays slightly ahead of the moment, anticipating, adjusting, preparing. Not because you're anxious in an obvious way,
but because readiness once kept things from getting worse. This is why rest can feel strangely uncomfortable. When the nervous system has been trained to stay alert, stillness doesn't always register as safe. Letting go can feel unfamiliar, even disorienting, as if something important might be missed if you stop paying attention. You might notice this in small, everyday ways. Even during downtime, your mind stays active. You relax, but only partially. Some part of you remains on watch. Emotionally, this can show up as containment. You feel things, but you process them internally. You don't naturally reach outward when you're overwhelmed. Not because you don't trust people, but because self-reliance became the fastest, most reliable way to cope.
Over time, the brain builds an identity around this. I handle things. I don't need much. I stay calm. And because these patterns are rewarded by teachers, employers, family, even friends, they get reinforced. The nervous system learns this works. What often goes unrecognized is that these patterns were never designed to help you rest, receive, or soften. They were designed to help you endure. And endurance, when it becomes a default setting, can quietly shape how you experience adulthood, especially in moments when nothing is technically wrong, but your body still doesn't fully stand down. At some point, it becomes worth asking a quieter, more difficult question. Not to judge yourself, not to undo what helped you survive, but to understand it. Is the way you move through the world now something you genuinely prefer, or something your system learned to rely on? Because there is a subtle difference between being independent and feeling uneasy when you're not. Between being calm and feeling responsible for holding everything together. Between being capable and feeling vaguely uncomfortable when someone tries to take care of you. When you grow up too fast, responsibility doesn't just teach you competence. It can teach you that slowing down is risky, that needing help is inefficient, that vulnerability should be managed quietly, privately, alone. None of this is a conscious belief. It lives deeper than thought. You might notice that you only truly relax when everything around you feels handled, or that you downplay your own needs without realizing it, or that you feel a strange sense of guilt when you rest, as if ease has to be earned. This is the uncomfortable part. Not because it means something went wrong, but because it suggests that what once protected you may now be quietly limiting how much support, softness, or relief you allow in. The question isn't whether your early maturity was good or bad. The question is whether the rules your nervous system learned back then are still the rules you want to live by now. And there's no pressure to answer that quickly. Awareness alone is a shift, because once you can see the pattern as an adaptation, you're no longer trapped inside it. Growing up too fast didn't break you. It organized you. It shaped a nervous system that learned how to stay steady when things were uncertain. It built a mind that knows how to anticipate, manage, and carry weight without drawing attention to itself. Those qualities didn't appear by accident, and they don't need to be erased. What matters is understanding what they were built for. You weren't designed to be constantly composed. You learned to be. You weren't meant to handle everything alone. You adapted to doing so. There's a difference. When you see your patterns this way, something softens. Not because you suddenly change, but because the quiet pressure to hold it all together loosens its grip. You may start to notice that rest doesn't have to be perfectly justified. That receiving support doesn't cancel your strength. That letting someone else carry something for a moment doesn't mean you've failed. None of this requires forcing yourself to become different. It begins with permission. Permission to recognize that your competence came from necessity. Permission to allow moments where you don't have to be the steady one. permission to explore what safety might feel like without constant readiness. Understanding this isn't about reliving the past. It's about updating the present. And if this way of seeing yourself brought a sense of quiet clarity, you're not alone in that experience. You can stay here, exploring these patterns at your own pace, not to fix yourself, but to understand the system you've been living inside. Nothing about you was a flaw. It was a response.